In 2013, a woman in Texas was convicted of murder, yet there was no body, no witnesses, and no physical evidence linking her to the crime. The trial seemed absurd on its face, but it was a case that defied logic and raised more questions than answers. What kind of twisted justice system would convict someone based on the mere whispers of suspicion, rumors, and circumstantial evidence? How could the state claim a woman was guilty of such a heinous crime when the central piece, the victim's body, had disappeared without a trace? Yet, in a courtroom in Texas, that's exactly what happened. No one had ever seen or heard from the victim since she vanished weeks before the trial began, but the prosecutors were determined to see the woman behind bars. It was an ordinary spring afternoon in the sleepy town of Denton, Texas, when the news broke. Sarah Jameson, a young woman in her late 20s, was reported missing. She had a quiet life, full of friends, a steady job, and a growing relationship with her boyfriend, Luke Patterson. Sarah's disappearance wasn't anything extraordinary at first. People simply thought she had left town for a while, maybe on a short trip, or that she'd gone off the grid for some personal time, something she had done before. However, the days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Sarah. As the weeks passed, the fear that something more sinister had occurred began to take root. Her family grew frantic, contacting local authorities and scouring every corner of the town, hoping for any clue that would lead to Sarah's whereabouts. But the more they searched, the more questions piled up. Where had she gone? Who was the last person to see her, and why hadn't anyone seen her leave? As the police began their investigation, they found strange inconsistencies. Her boyfriend Luke seemed unfazed by her disappearance. He didn't display the level of concern one would expect from a partner in such a situation. His behavior became more erratic, and friends began to notice strange things. His timeline of events didn't add up, his stories changed when questioned. But still there was no evidence to suggest anything criminal. No proof that Luke had anything to do with Sarah's disappearance. That is, until the police uncovered an unexpected lead. A neighbor had reported hearing strange noises coming from Luke's apartment on the night Sarah vanished. The noises were muffled but described as unsettling, a mix of shouting, pounding, and what sounded like objects being thrown. The neighbor even recalled seeing Luke's car parked outside, but Sarah was nowhere to be seen. A month after Sarah's disappearance, the Denton Police Department arrested Luke Patterson, charging him with the murder of Sarah Jameson. The arrest sent shockwaves through the small town, but the more people thought about it, the more it started to make sense. Luke had been the last person to see her after all. But there was still a massive problem. There was no body, no forensic evidence, and no clear motive. Yet the police were confident in their case. The trial began, and what was revealed during those proceedings was enough to make even the most seasoned courtroom veterans raise their eyebrows. The prosecutors, led by District Attorney Amanda King, presented the case with urgency, presenting circumstantial evidence that seemed to be pieced together from thin air. Sarah's clothes were found discarded in a dumpster miles from Luke's apartment, but there was no physical trace of her on any of them. The only thing the investigators could pinpoint was the fact that the clothes were mysteriously tied to Luke's ex-girlfriend, a woman who had a grudge against him. Yet, that alone seemed like a stretch. The lack of direct evidence made it nearly impossible to definitively prove Luke's guilt. So why then was he facing such a severe charge? As the trial continued, even more startling details came to light. Luke, initially confident in his innocence, started to unravel under the pressure of the trial. His emotions ranged from cold indifference to what seemed like bursts of anger that were hard to ignore. He refused to cooperate fully with the investigation, but as time passed, his story began to change. The timeline, once set in stone, now seemed malleable. He gave conflicting statements to both the police and the defense attorneys. At one point, Luke claimed he'd been out of town on the night Sarah disappeared, but his cell phone records told a different story. He was at home, right where the neighbor's account had described the commotion, but still the real questions lingered in the minds of the public. Why had Luke changed his story? Why hadn't he shown genuine concern for Sarah's disappearance? And perhaps most perplexing of all, where was Sarah's body? As if the case weren't already bizarre enough, the twist came in the form of a confession, or what appeared to be one. On the eve of the jury's deliberation, Luke's defense lawyer, Robert Evans, made an unprecedented move. In a last-ditch attempt to exonerate his client, Evans called a surprise witness to the stand, Sarah's estranged father, Timothy Jameson. Timothy, who had been largely absent from the investigation until now, shockingly revealed that he had been in contact with Sarah just hours before she vanished. His testimony threw the entire case into disarray. Timothy claimed that his daughter had been involved in a secret relationship with someone else, a man named Marcus Lyle, someone Sarah had known in the past. This revelation turned the entire theory about Sarah's disappearance upside down. According to Timothy, Sarah had been planning to leave Luke, to start fresh with Marcus, and had even told her father that she was done with the relationship. This new development shocked both the prosecution and the defense, and it set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. In a dramatic turn, the defense attorney presented the theory that Sarah's disappearance had nothing to do with Luke at all, but instead involved Marcus, the man she had been planning to escape to. And yet, Marcus Lyle had an airtight alibi. He was miles away when Sarah vanished. So, where did that leave them? But just when it seemed like everything was about to fall apart for the prosecution, something unexpected happened. A forensic expert discovered a critical piece of evidence that had been overlooked during the initial investigation. A single strand of hair that didn't belong to Sarah, Luke, or anyone else in the immediate circle. The hair, found on a jacket inside Luke's apartment, did not match any known suspects, and its DNA was not on file. The authorities now had to consider the possibility that there was a third party involved in Sarah's disappearance. Who was the mysterious person connected to this single hair? Why had the authorities not connected the dots sooner? What dark secrets did Luke's apartment still hold? The revelation of this new evidence rocked the entire case, and as the trial reached its most intense point, everything that had been previously assumed was suddenly questioned. Was Luke truly guilty, or was someone else pulling the strings? The courtroom was silent as the jury prepared to make their decision, the weight of the evidence and the startling inconsistencies hanging in the air like a thick fog. The clock was ticking, and the fate of Sarah Jameson and Luke Patterson hung in the balance. If you find this story interesting, kindly subscribe to this channel for more of these kinds of stories, as we dive in unraveling the mystery behind Sarah's disappearance. If you find this story interesting, kindly subscribe to this channel for more of these kinds of stories as we dive in unraveling the mystery behind Sarah's disappearance. As the jury filed into the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The weight of the previous trial, the shocking twists, and the damning revelations still lingered in the air like a storm ready to break. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on Luke Patterson, whose fate seemed to rest on the next few moments. Would the jury believe that he was innocent? Or would they convict him of a crime that had no body, no solid evidence, and a myriad of strange inconsistencies? The prosecution was still reeling from the last-minute bombshell of Sarah's father's testimony about Marcus Lyle. The twist had thrown their entire case into chaos. Yet, despite the confusion, the prosecution had been relentless in pushing the theory that Luke was still guilty. They had his alibi, a theory that just didn't hold up considering the damning evidence in the form of the mysterious strand of hair. And they still had the blood on his shirt, the disturbing lack of emotion, and the neighbor's description of the disturbing noises on the night Sarah vanished. But it was the hair. No one had seen that coming. The hair, a small but crucial piece of evidence, was discovered inside Luke's apartment, hidden deep within the folds of a jacket he had worn regularly. It didn't belong to Sarah, nor did it match Luke's DNA or anyone else within his immediate circle. The discovery, though seemingly small, was a game-changer. Forensic experts analyzed it carefully, finding it to be of a rare texture and color that didn't seem to match anyone they had interviewed so far. Who was this person? Where did they come from? And how were they connected to Sarah's disappearance? The police, after combing through the hair's DNA, were left with a haunting question. Was it possible that someone else, someone completely unknown to both Sarah and Luke, had been involved in her disappearance? The absence of any other physical evidence tying anyone else to the crime made it feel like they were staring at a dead end, but the hair left open a small, unsettling possibility. With this new evidence on the table, it was clear that the case wasn't as clear-cut as everyone had initially thought. Luke's defense team now had an opportunity to turn the tide. The prosecution had relied so heavily on circumstantial evidence, Luke's alibi, his behavior, the blood spatter on his shirt, but the discovery of the hair made everything feel fragile. Luke, desperate to prove his innocence, clung to this new lead as a lifeline. But would it be enough to save him? The case had taken a strange turn. What had once been an open and shut case against Luke Patterson was now riddled with unanswered questions. Who was this mysterious person? And what was their connection to Sarah Jameson? What else had been missed during the initial investigation? Detective Carla Hartwell, a seasoned investigator known for her keen eye for detail, was called back in to re-examine the crime scene. She was determined to get to the bottom of this new lead. The hair alone wasn't enough to tie anyone to Sarah's disappearance, but it was a significant piece of the puzzle that couldn't be ignored. After conducting interviews with everyone connected to Sarah, from family members to friends, and even the mysterious Marcus Lyle, Hartwell began to suspect that there was more to the story. There were whispers, subtle mentions, and patterns that hadn't been fully explored before. It was as if Sarah had been trying to tell a story before she disappeared. Her strange behavior before vanishing, her secretive nature, her late-night texts, the erratic conversations with friends about an escape plan, hinted at something darker lurking beneath the surface. Hartwell wasn't convinced that Luke was the only person who could have had a hand in Sarah's disappearance. There were too many gaps in the timeline, too many inconsistencies that made it feel like someone was being overlooked. But who, and why? Days after the hair was discovered, Hartwell's instincts led her to uncover a chilling lead. A woman named Emily Clark, a former friend of Sarah's, came forward with a tip. Emily, visibly shaken, claimed that Sarah had been talking about a dangerous secret she had been keeping from everyone. Sarah had been involved with someone she described as unstable. Someone who had hurt her in the past, and whom she had been trying to escape for months. But Sarah had never mentioned who this person was. Emily only knew that Sarah had been afraid for her life. Suddenly, it all started to make sense. The mention of a dangerous secret suggested that Sarah had been living in fear long before her disappearance. Was this someone from her past? Could they have been involved in her disappearance? And if so, why had this person remained a ghost throughout the investigation? Emily revealed something even more alarming. Sarah had been keeping a journal filled with cryptic entries, some of which referenced an encounter with a mysterious figure just days before she vanished. According to Emily, Sarah had been scared. She was trying to leave town, to escape whatever it was that had been following her. But there was one final entry that sent shivers down Emily's spine. If I'm not here tomorrow, it's him. Who was him? And why had Sarah's family, friends, and the police never considered the possibility that this was a case of someone chasing Sarah? Someone who might have been right under their noses the whole time. Hartwell immediately secured a search warrant for Sarah's apartment, looking for any signs of this mysterious person. Inside, they found Sarah's journal, exactly where Emily had described. The entries were chilling, filled with signs of desperation, fear, and the knowledge that Sarah was running out of time. One entry read, "I've made a mistake. I don't know how to get away from him. He won't let me go. I have to be smarter this time. I won't go back to him, even if it costs me everything." But Sarah never wrote who he was. As the police delved deeper into Sarah's past, they uncovered a web of lies, deceit, and hidden relationships that stretched back years. The man Sarah was trying to escape wasn't just a random figure. He was someone she had been involved with years ago. A man named Jordan Webb, who had a history of violent outbursts and stalking ex-partners. Jordan had been quiet in the media, staying out of the public eye, but as investigators dug further, they uncovered a history of violent incidents and accusations against him, none of which had been fully investigated. His connections to Sarah were buried beneath a pile of unanswered questions, and his involvement in her life seemed to have been erased deliberately. Jordan Webb, a man with a criminal record, had recently moved back to Texas after years of living off the grid. Could he have been the person responsible for Sarah's disappearance? And if so, why had the police never connected the dots between him and the case? The more Hartwell dug into Jordan's past, the more she realized that Sarah had been hiding her fear for a reason. Jordan was the shadow lurking behind every corner, the specter who had been watching her every move. But just when they thought they had cracked the case, something even more unnerving happened. Hartwell's team uncovered surveillance footage from a local gas station, showing a man matching Jordan's description, standing eerily close to Sarah just days before her disappearance. Was this the moment everything changed? Or was this simply another false lead, another dead end? As the case took a dangerous turn, Detective Hartwell received an anonymous tip that sent her into a spiral of uncertainty. A chilling voice on the other end of the line simply said, "You've been looking in the wrong place." The clock was ticking. The puzzle pieces were slowly coming together, but there was still one vital question left unanswered. Where was Sarah's body? And if Jordan Webb was the one behind everything, what had he done with her? With this new revelation, Hartwell realized that they were closer than ever to uncovering the truth. But the twists weren't over yet. The walls were closing in, and the case that had seemed like a straight path to conviction was now a labyrinth of suspicion, deceit, and haunting shadows. Would they find Sarah before it was too late? It is getting interesting. Subscribe to the channel as we dive deeper into the shocking truth behind Sarah's disappearance, and the twist that no one saw coming.
As the case continued to unfold, Detective Carla Hartwell found herself standing at the precipice of something far darker than she had ever imagined. Each new piece of evidence only deepened the mystery, and with every answer came even more unsettling questions. The chilling voice on the phone had hinted at something sinister, something more than what they had uncovered so far. "You've been looking in the wrong place." Those words echoed in Hartwell's mind, reverberating through every corner of the case. What did it mean? And more importantly, who had made the call? Every lead seemed to be veering away from what they had initially thought was the truth. The discovery of Jordan Webb's connection to Sarah Jameson raised more questions than answers. Who was this man really? Why had he come back to Texas after so many years? And if he was the one responsible for Sarah's disappearance, where was she? What had happened to her? Hartwell was determined to find out. The chilling reveal. With Jordan Webb's name now firmly in the frame, Hartwell's investigation turned toward his whereabouts, past relationships, and anything that could have linked him to Sarah. As she dug deeper into his life, she found an unsettling pattern. Webb had a long history of controlling, manipulative behavior. He had stalked previous partners, used intimidation, and left a trail of emotional wreckage wherever he went. And yet, there had been no arrest, no serious intervention in his previous relationships, despite the fact that his exes had all reported similar stories. Hartwell was starting to believe that the missing piece of the puzzle wasn't just about finding Sarah. It was about understanding the kind of man Jordan Webb truly was. And as she uncovered more about his troubled past, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Jordan Webb wasn't just a man trying to reconnect with an old flame, he was a predator. And Sarah had been his next victim. But there was still no clear sign that Webb had been directly involved in Sarah's disappearance. No solid proof to tie him to the crime scene. So what could Hartwell do with this information? Without physical evidence, all they had were the confessions of victims who had escaped his grasp and the haunting words Sarah had left behind. The hidden truth in Sarah's journal. Hartwell took another look at Sarah's journal, which had been discovered at her apartment. The cryptic entries became more chilling with each reading. The phrases that had once seemed vague now appeared to point directly to Jordan Webb. Sarah's last entry read, "I know what he's capable of. I need to leave, but he won't let me go. I'm scared. Scared he'll hurt me before I get away. He's watching me. He won't let me go." Every page was filled with Sarah's fear. But what had made Jordan so dangerous? What had caused her to feel like there was no escape? And if she had been trying to leave him, why hadn't she just gone? Why had she stayed in contact with him, knowing how volatile he was? The more Hartwell read, the more the pieces of Sarah's life began to fall into place. Sarah's world had been one of constant fear, moving between fleeting moments of safety and suffocating terror. Jordan Webb had been her captor in a way, even if he hadn't physically confined her. His control over her, his manipulation, his emotional abuse, had been too much to break free from, even though Sarah had desperately wanted to. The breaking point. On a cold evening, just a few days before Sarah's disappearance, Hartwell made a breakthrough. In an unexpected twist, they discovered a hidden text message sent from Sarah's phone just hours before she vanished. The message, sent to a close friend, read, "I think he knows. He's been following me. I'm scared. I don't know how to get away from him anymore." It was like a final cry for help, but one that no one had been able to act on in time. Sarah had been reaching out, but it seemed as though her words were buried in the shuffle of everyday life. The police had missed this critical detail in their initial investigation. The text, which was sent to Sarah's best friend, was chilling. It painted the picture of a woman who was trapped, who had nowhere to turn. She had been trying to leave, but Jordan was too powerful, too calculating. The police had focused so much on Luke Patterson, on the man who had been with Sarah before her disappearance, that they had missed the possibility of a dangerous ex who had been lurking in the background. But now, with Jordan Webb's name and the text messages, everything pointed back to him. Hartwell could almost feel the truth slipping into place. A shocking twist. The surveillance footage. The breakthrough came in the form of surveillance footage from a gas station near Sarah's apartment. The footage was taken just hours before she disappeared. In it, a man who closely resembled Jordan Webb was seen at the counter, buying something. At first glance, it seemed like just another routine purchase, nothing to raise suspicion. But then, upon closer inspection, Hartwell noticed something horrifying. Jordan Webb had been following Sarah. The footage clearly showed him walking out of the store and then driving his car to a nearby parking lot, where he parked his vehicle and sat waiting. The timestamps on the footage showed that he had been watching Sarah for hours before she disappeared. He hadn't just been a part of her life. He had been stalking her, and now he was hunting her. In that moment, everything clicked for Hartwell. This was no longer a simple case of a missing woman. This was a case of a woman being hunted by someone she knew well, someone who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, that moment had arrived. The discovery of the weapon. The next critical breakthrough came after another search of Jordan Webb's home. Hartwell's team found a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, and inside, they found a revolver, one that had been reported stolen years ago. The gun was covered in rust, but there was something about it that didn't sit right. They ran a check on the weapon and found that it had been used in a series of violent crimes, including a recent robbery. But what really made it stand out was the fact that the gun matched the caliber of the bullets found in Sarah's neighborhood. Hartwell's team began to piece it together. It was the same gun that had been used to kill Sarah, or so they thought. But there was still a hole in the story. No one had seen Jordan with a gun during the time of Sarah's disappearance. Where had he hidden it? And why hadn't they found it sooner? As the investigation into Jordan Webb deepened, it became clearer that he wasn't acting alone. There was someone else, a shadow in the background, pulling strings, setting things into motion. This wasn't a simple case of a man stalking a woman and eventually killing her. No, this was something far more complex, something more carefully planned. Jordan had been in contact with someone who had been watching Sarah too, and that someone was about to reveal themselves in a way no one could have anticipated. With time running out, Detective Hartwell faced the greatest dilemma of her career. She had uncovered so many lies, so many hidden secrets, that she knew she was on the verge of cracking the case wide open. But there was one final, unanswered question that remained. Who had helped Jordan? The police had uncovered an encrypted phone hidden in Sarah's apartment, one that hadn't been reported missing until now. And it contained something terrifying, a single voicemail, one that had been sent to Sarah just days before she vanished. The voice on the other end wasn't Jordan's. It was someone new.
He's too dangerous. You need to leave before it's too late.
And then the voicemail cut off. Detective Hartwell was about to make one of the most shocking discoveries of her career. But before she could investigate further, her phone rang. It was the voice of the mysterious informant, someone who claimed to know everything about Sarah's disappearance. But just as Hartwell was about to hear the truth, the line went dead.
Have you subscribed? Please do, because it's getting interesting.
Detective Carla Hartwell's heart raced as the phone call abruptly ended. The mystery informant had dropped a bombshell. He's too dangerous. You need to leave before it's too late. And then disappeared into thin air. Every instinct in Hartwell's mind screamed that she was closer than ever to cracking the case wide open. But now, just when the truth was within reach, she was left in a fog of uncertainty. Well, who was this informant? Why had they waited until now to speak out? And most importantly, what did they know that could change the entire course of the investigation? With the informant's voicemail in hand, Hartwell and her team scrambled to track down any possible leads. The phone call had been from a burner phone. No names, no address, just a cryptic message that added fuel to the fire. The team worked tirelessly, trying to decrypt the voicemail, examining every word for hidden clues. It wasn't long before Hartwell received a tip about a woman named Lana Rivera, a name that had never come up in the investigation before. Lana revealed something shocking. According to her, Sarah and Jordan's connection went much deeper than anyone had realized. This third person, Lana insisted, was dangerous. Lana's story was chilling. She recounted a time when Sarah confided in her about a man named Vincent Clark, a person who had been haunting Sarah for years. The revelation shook Hartwell to her core. Vincent Clark was the missing link.
Detective Carla Hartwell stared at her laptop screen in disbelief. The security footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. The figure walking away from Sarah's last known location wasn't a stranger. It was Sarah's best friend, Emily Parker. "I don't know what you're talking about," but Emily's hands and darting eyes told a different story. When confronted with the evidence, her facade crumbled. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Jordan made me do it. I was jealous of Sarah, always second best. When Jordan said we could finally have it all, I believed him." You think you know the story, but you don't. The truth is darker than you think. Jordan had a plan, and I helped him.
Detective Carla Hartwell's eyes darted across the room as she stared at the final piece of the puzzle in front of her. The anonymous voice message had opened a door she hadn't anticipated, and now she was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. It had been weeks since Emily and Molly had been taken into custody, but there was something about their story that didn't add up. The mystery figure. The person who had been pulling the strings. Who could it be? She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The phone rang, breaking her concentration. It was Officer Ryan, her right-hand man.
"Detective, you need to get down here. We've got something you need to see."
Hartwell's heart skipped a beat. She grabbed her jacket and headed out the door, not bothering to ask any more questions. She had a feeling that this was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. When Hartwell arrived at the station, Officer Ryan was waiting for her at the evidence board. He looked agitated, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and disbelief.
"You won't believe this,"
he said, handing her a thick folder. Inside the folder were a series of photos and documents, handwritten notes, diagrams, and financial records that immediately caught Hartwell's attention. They were all tied to someone she hadn't considered before, the mysterious person who had orchestrated Sarah's death. As she sifted through the documents, one name jumped out at her. Avery Halliday. Avery Halliday? Avery Halliday? But as she studied the pages in front of her, she began to piece together the connection. Avery Halliday wasn't just some random figure. He was a well-connected business tycoon who had deep ties to the local community and had been a friend of Jordan Webb's family for years. But that was just the beginning. As Hartwell dug deeper, she discovered that Avery Halliday had a dark past, one that had been buried beneath layers of wealth, influence, and respectability. He had been involved in several questionable business deals, but more troublingly, he had been linked to multiple failed relationships and rumors of violent outbursts. Several people in the community had referred to him as a controlling figure, someone who manipulated others to get what he wanted. As the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, Hartwell felt a cold chill run down her spine. Avery Halliday wasn't just a bystander in this case. He had been the one pulling the strings all along. Hartwell sat at her desk, her mind spinning with the revelations. Emily and Molly had been the visible players in Sarah's tragic story, but the true mastermind had been hiding in plain sight. What did Avery Halliday want from Sarah? Why had he wanted her out of the picture? And what role did Jordan Webb play in all of this? It became clear that Avery's influence on Jordan had been far-reaching and manipulative. Emily and Molly had been mere pawns in his game, used to set Sarah up for the ultimate betrayal. Avery had been pulling the strings from the shadows, using his connections to orchestrate the crime and cover up his involvement. Hartwell immediately set up a meeting with her team to discuss the next steps. Avery Halliday was no longer a name on a piece of paper. He was the key to everything, the one who had manipulated Emily, Molly, and even Jordan to do his bidding. But the big question remained: why? The breakthrough came when Hartwell was able to speak with a close family member of Avery Halliday's. The person, who had requested anonymity, revealed something that made Hartwell's stomach turn. Avery had been obsessed with Sarah Webb. Not in the way someone might admire a public figure, but in a way that could only be described as unhealthy. Avery had been in love with Sarah for years, a fact that she had never known.
He couldn't have her, so he made sure that no one else could either.
It all started years ago, when Sarah's father, a wealthy real estate mogul, had unknowingly become a business partner with Avery Halliday. Avery had been smitten with Sarah from the moment he laid eyes on her. At first, it was an innocent admiration. But as the years passed, it turned into an obsession. Sarah, however, had never shown any interest in Avery. She had always seen him as a family friend, nothing more. But Avery's love for Sarah grew more intense and possessive with each passing day. He began to manipulate situations, trying to insert himself into her life in any way possible. When Sarah started dating Jordan Webb, Avery's jealousy consumed him. He believed that if Sarah was with Jordan, she could never be his. Avery's obsession reached its breaking point when Sarah's father decided to sell off some of his assets, including the business that had linked him to Avery. Avery had feared that if Sarah's family distanced themselves from him, he would lose his only chance at getting close to her. In his mind, the only way to stop it was to get rid of Sarah once and for all. Hartwell leaned back in her chair, her breath catching in her throat. Avery's plan had been chilling, but it wasn't just the act itself that was horrific. It was the methodical way in which he'd gone about it. He had known exactly what he was doing the entire time. He was the puppet master, and Emily, Molly, and Jordan were all just his pawns. Hartwell knew it was time to confront Avery Halliday. With the evidence stacking up, she finally had enough to arrest him. But she needed to be careful. Avery was a powerful figure in the community, and his arrest could trigger a firestorm. The question now was, would he confess to his role in Sarah's death? Or would he continue to deny everything, using his wealth and influence to cover his tracks? As Hartwell's team prepared to make their move, the tension in the air was palpable. Avery Halliday had been a ghost in the investigation for so long, but now, with everything pointing to him, Hartwell had one final question to answer. Would Avery crack under the pressure?
Detective Carla Hartwell's mind raced as she tried to process the bombshell dropped by Molly, Sarah's sister. The phone call had left her feeling more confused than ever. Could Molly really be involved in Sarah's disappearance? Had she been part of the conspiracy all along? Everything that Hartwell thought she knew about the case was unraveling in front of her eyes. Everything that Hartwell thought she knew about the case was unraveling in front of her eyes. Molly's voice had been shaking when she confessed to her involvement. At first, Hartwell had been skeptical, unsure whether Molly was just trying to absolve herself of any blame. But as the conversation unfolded, it became clear, Molly had played a pivotal role in Sarah's death. Molly had been Sarah's closest confidant, the one person who knew all of Sarah's secrets. And for years, they had shared everything, until that fateful day when everything began to fall apart. Molly had been deeply entangled in the turmoil between Sarah and Jordan, and as it turned out, she had her own reasons for wanting to see Sarah gone. Molly revealed that she had secretly been in love with Jordan Webb for years, a fact Sarah had never known. The two had been secretly involved in a twisted love triangle, with Molly caught in the middle of it all. She had watched for years as Sarah's relationship with Jordan deteriorated, and in the shadows Molly had nurtured her own feelings for him.
I didn't want to be second to Sarah anymore,
Molly admitted, her voice barely audible.
Jordan was always looking at her, loving her. And I thought, maybe if she were out of the picture, he would finally see me. I wanted to be the one he turned to, not her.
But jealousy wasn't the only factor driving Molly. She had also been afraid of what Sarah would expose about their family, about her past with Jordan, and the secret relationship she had been hiding from everyone.
I was scared, Carla. I was terrified that Sarah would ruin everything I had worked so hard to build. So I had to stop her.
Molly's voice broke, revealing the weight of the guilt she had been carrying for months. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, it became clear that Molly wasn't just an innocent bystander. She had been actively involved in orchestrating Sarah's disappearance, and she had been working closely with Emily, Sarah's supposed best friend. The two of them had conspired together to get rid of Sarah and ensure that their lives would be free from her shadow. Emily and Molly had become close allies in this dark plan. Emily, who had been angry at Sarah for rejecting her, had found a kindred spirit in Molly. Together, they had manipulated Jordan Webb into believing that they could create a future without Sarah, that they could finally be free to live the lives they wanted.
It was supposed to be a clean break.
Emily explained, now speaking to Hartwell after she had been taken into custody.
We thought that if Sarah disappeared, everything would be better. But we never anticipated it would end like this.
Hartwell's gut twisted as she listened to Emily's words. The two women had been playing a dangerous game, using Jordan as a pawn to execute their twisted plan. But what had pushed them to go so far? What had made them decide to end Sarah's life in such a brutal, horrifying way? The night Sarah disappeared was when everything went horribly wrong. Molly and Emily had been working behind the scenes, planting the seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind about Jordan's loyalty. They had orchestrated subtle manipulations, making Jordan seem like the perfect person to help them carry out their plan. They had given Jordan the idea that Sarah was ready to leave him, that she was planning to take everything from him, everything that mattered to him. But Sarah had no idea that Molly and Emily were using her as a pawn in their own twisted game. That night, as Sarah sat in her apartment, Emily had called her, pretending to be her best friend, comforting her, soothing her, and making Sarah feel safe. Emily had convinced her to meet with Jordan one last time to talk things through. But Sarah's meeting with Jordan was no ordinary reunion. It was a carefully orchestrated ambush, and Emily and Molly had planned every detail.
We knew she'd go.
Emily confessed, tears streaming down her face as she recalled the events.
She trusted me, she believed in me, and we made sure she walked right into their trap.
When Sarah entered the garage that night, there had been no escape. Molly, Emily, and Jordan had all been waiting for her. And in the blink of an eye, everything had spiraled out of control. Jordan had shot Sarah, and the others had watched in silence. But there was one more detail that made the case even more chilling. The gun Jordan had used wasn't his. It wasn't even registered in his name. Instead, it had been Charles Bonnet's, the man who had been involved in the gun deal, the man whose DNA had been found at the scene. Charles had played a key role in supplying the weapon used to kill Sarah, and now, as Hartwell realized, he was just another pawn in this sick game. But the most disturbing revelation came when Emily revealed the final piece of the puzzle.
We made sure there was no evidence left behind.
Emily said, her voice cold.
We cleaned up. We made sure everything was perfect. And we never thought we'd get caught. But I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell you the truth.
But I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell you the truth. As the investigation continued, Hartwell received another anonymous tip. This time from a source who claimed to have information that could clear Jordan Webb's name. The tip came in the form of a voice message, leaving Hartwell with more questions than answers.
If you want to find out who the real killer is, look at the man who's been pulling the strings. It wasn't just Emily and Molly. There's someone else. Someone who's been hiding in plain sight.
Hartwell was stunned. Who could this mysterious person be? Was it possible that someone else had been controlling everything all along? With the investigation on the brink of collapse and Emily and Molly in custody, Detective Hartwell felt the weight of the mystery bearing down on her. Who was the man behind it all? Who had been pulling the strings, orchestrating this deadly game? As the investigation reached its breaking point, Hartwell's next step would lead her to a truth darker than anything she could have imagined. Stay tuned as we reveal the identity of the mysterious mastermind behind Sarah's tragic death, and the shocking conclusion to the case that no one saw coming.
The pressure was mounting. Detective Hartwell knew this was it. The final confrontation with Avery Halliday.
You did it, Avery. The phone records, the DNA, the testimonies from Emily, Molly, and Jordan. Everything points to you.
You think you know everything, don't you? You think by piecing this together you solved your little puzzle. But you don't know the half of it.
What are you talking about? What am I missing?
The real mastermind behind all of this isn't me. It was always Jordan Webb. He manipulated Emily, Molly, and even me. We were all just pawns in his game. Jordan Webb, Sarah's own fiancé, the true architect of her murder. Will Detective Hartwell stop him before it's too late?
Detective Hartwell sat at her desk, the dim light of the evening casting long shadows across her office. The case had been long, exhausting, and nothing like she had expected. She had chased leads, followed clues, and pieced together a web of lies. But at this moment, everything seemed to be converging toward one final confrontation. Avery had cracked open the mystery, revealing the true villain behind Sarah Webb's death. Jordan Webb. Hartwell's mind raced. She had all the evidence, all the confessions. She knew Jordan's every move, every deception. But there was one question that still loomed over her. Would she catch him before it was too late? As she studied the files on her desk, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Avery Halliday had been the puppet, and Jordan had been the puppeteer, controlling every action behind the scenes. His motives, power, control, and greed, had driven him to orchestrate Sarah's death and manipulate everyone involved. But his game wasn't over. He was still out there, waiting. Hartwell's phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Officer Ryan.
Detective, we've located Jordan. He's been hiding in plain sight. He's using a friend's cabin in the woods outside of town.
The realization hit Hartwell like a punch to the gut. Jordan Webb had been right under her nose this whole time, playing the perfect role of the innocent fiancé. He had managed to manipulate everyone around him, Emily, Molly, and even his own family, into helping him execute his sickening plan. But now he was isolated, and she had one shot to end this once and for all. Get a team ready. We're moving in now. We can't wait any longer. Hartwell and her team arrived at the cabin just as night fell. The dense woods surrounding the cabin made the area feel eerily silent. No cars, no lights, just the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Hartwell's heart beat in her chest like a drum. She had come too far to let Jordan slip through her fingers now. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into. As they approached the cabin, Hartwell's mind flashed back to everything she had learned about Jordan. The manipulations, the lies, the people he had used and discarded. His obsession with Sarah had been the driving force, but his need for control over everything, her family, her future, was what made him so dangerous. They reached the door, and Hartwell signaled for her team to surround the building. She didn't know what to expect, whether Jordan would be waiting for them, ready to fight, or whether he would run. But one thing was certain. This was the end game. Hartwell nodded to Ryan, who kicked the door in. The team rushed inside, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every corner. The cabin was eerily quiet. It was empty. But then they heard a rustling noise coming from the back. Jordan was here. Hartwell led the charge toward the back of the cabin. As they rounded the corner, they found Jordan standing by a window, his back turned to them. The smug look on his face made Hartwell's blood boil. He wasn't surprised to see them. He had been waiting for this moment. Jordan, it's over. You're coming with us. Jordan slowly turned to face her. For a split second, his eyes flickered with something resembling fear, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by that same cold smirk.
You think you've won? This was never about Sarah. This was about me taking control of everything I've ever wanted. And now you're too late.
But before she could take another step, Jordan raised his hand, and in his fingers was a gun, aimed directly at Hartwell. The tension in the air thickened. A standoff. You don't understand, Jordan said, his voice low but tinged with desperation. I never wanted this. It's all just been a game to get what I deserve. All these years I've been forced to watch from the sidelines, never getting what I want. Sarah's family, her wealth. It was always in my reach, but she kept pushing me away. You don't know what it's like to be trapped in someone else's life, Detective. Hartwell stood frozen, her heart pounding in her ears. You took everything from Sarah. You killed her. You killed her family. Jordan's lips curled into a smile. No, Detective, I didn't kill them. I freed them. The words hit Hartwell like a slap to the face. Freed them? What was he talking about? She wasn't sure if it was his insanity, his manipulation, or something else entirely. But at that moment, she realized that Jordan had a twisted rationale. You never understood, did you? They were all holding me back, all of them. And I had to make it stop. Sarah, her family, they were all in my way. They had to be eliminated. Just like you. Just like all of you who keep standing in my way. Before Hartwell could respond, Jordan raised his gun, and the world seemed to slow down. Just as Jordan's fingers squeezed the trigger, Hartwell acted instinctively. She lunged toward him, tackling him to the ground. The gunshot rang out, deafening in the quiet night. But who was hit? Everything happened in an instant. The struggle for control between Hartwell and Jordan a blur. Ryan was at her side in seconds, grabbing Jordan's arms and pulling him away from the weapon. The room was filled with shouting, but all Hartwell could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. She looked down at herself, half expecting to feel the burn of a bullet. But when she saw the blood on her uniform, her stomach dropped. Who had been shot? And more importantly, was it too late to save them? The world felt like it was spinning as Detective Hartwell collapsed onto the ground, her pulse racing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline that had fueled her through the past few days now crashed down on her like a wave. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her radio, her voice shaky but urgent as she called for backup. "Officer down! We need immediate medical assistance!"
Hartwell, are you okay?
But all she could do was look down at the blood pooling around her leg, spreading across the ground. Her heart sank. She had been hit. The sound of footsteps grew louder as the backup team arrived, quickly rushing to her side. The world around her seemed to fade into a blur, her vision narrowing as she fought to stay conscious. Ryan kneeled beside her, his face a mask of concern as he tried to stem the bleeding.
Hold on, Hartwell. Help is on the way. Stay with me.
The pressure on her wound was intense, but it wasn't the pain that rattled her. It was the thought of Jordan getting away. His twisted smile flashed in her mind as she remembered his words. "I freed them. I freed them all." But what did that mean? What had he meant by that final declaration? Did he really believe that killing Sarah and her family was some kind of liberation? As the paramedics arrived and lifted her onto a stretcher, she felt the darkness closing in. She fought against it, unwilling to let her life slip away while Jordan remained out there, so close to escaping. But the last thing Hartwell remembered before slipping into unconsciousness was one thought. Is this over, or is it just beginning? The next few days were a blur of hospitals, surgeries, and recovery. Hartwell was left grappling not only with her physical wounds, but also with the emotional toll this case had taken on her. But despite her pain, one question continued to haunt her. What had Jordan meant? Was he telling the truth? Was there someone else pulling the strings? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Had they missed something crucial? As she lay in the sterile hospital room, her mind wandered back to the confession Avery had made. The moment when he told her that someone else, someone they never would have suspected, was really behind everything. Could that person have been closer to Jordan than she had realized? Hartwell knew one thing for certain. She couldn't rest until the truth came out. She had to finish this. As Hartwell slowly recovered, she requested access to all of the case files again. She meticulously went through every detail, every shred of evidence that had led her to this point. She needed to understand how she had missed something so critical. It wasn't until she revisited Avery's confession that the pieces started falling into place. Avery had mentioned someone, Jordan's father. Up until this moment, she had assumed that Jordan's motivations were personal, his jealousy, his obsession with Sarah. But there was a deeper connection, something far more sinister than she had initially believed. Jordan's father had been involved with some shady business dealings, and it seemed that the entire Webb family was tangled in a web of corruption that went back decades. Hartwell's pulse quickened as she pieced together the story from the fragments of information she had. Avery had been right. Jordan's father had a history of financial crimes and dirty deals, and when Avery had mentioned that Jordan had been the true mastermind behind the murder, it wasn't just about Sarah. It was about something much bigger. It was about money. As Hartwell followed the trail, she discovered that Jordan's father was just as dangerous and manipulative as his son. He had been the real puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Jordan's violent actions had been fueled by a combination of greed, entitlement, and the influence of his father. He wanted it all, and he was willing to kill for it. It wasn't just about getting rid of Sarah. It was about controlling her inheritance, her business, and ultimately, her life. Everything Jordan had done, every step he had taken, had been to remove the obstacles standing between him and the power he craved. And now, with the investigation inching closer to the truth, Jordan knew that his time was running out. He had to act fast. The final confrontation came just as Hartwell's team closed in on Jordan's location. They had tracked him to an abandoned cabin just outside of town. He was preparing to flee, knowing that the walls were closing in on him. Hartwell's team surrounded the cabin, their guns drawn and their nerves on edge. This was it, the final showdown. As Hartwell approached the door, her hand shaking as she gripped her weapon, she knew that she was about to face Jordan one last time. But as she stepped forward, a chilling realization hit her. Had they been chasing the wrong person all along? Before she could process the thought, the door burst open and Jordan stepped out, a gun in his hand, his face twisted in a mix of rage and desperation.
You think you've won? You have no idea what's really been going on. No idea who's really behind all of this.
And then, as if on cue, another figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the moonlight. It was Avery Halliday.
Don't shoot him, Hartwell. You don't know the full story. I didn't kill Sarah. I didn't kill anyone. It was him. It was Jordan's father.
Hartwell froze, her weapon still raised but her mind racing. Was Avery confessing? Or was he trying to cover his tracks? The truth was slipping further and further away, and in that moment it felt like it might never be fully revealed.
No, you don't get it. It was never about Sarah. It was about power, about control, about us, my father and me.